Okay, so now I will talk about an application of robotic telescopes in a university context, specifically the Open University in the UK, where I am, just as John Baruch was, the previous speaker. This work is a collaborative work assessing the effectiveness of the way we used the robotic telescope to mimic the experience our students need for practical science, and in fact for replacing a previously existing field trip to an observatory where the students had a chance to actually sit next to the telescope and enjoy the night sky, but which was discontinued because quite a lot of our students are not able to come to these field schools or residential schools. There are too many of them, they are too expensive. Just preceding this with some basic information on the Open University in the UK. It is, because realizing you may not know the details there, it is the UK's largest university with about 170,000 students. The reason it's so large a number is it is a distance teaching university and most students are part-time students. We have a large network of tutors across the country helping the centrally located staff at our main campus in Milton Keynes to deliver this. Milton Keynes is in the golden triangle of England between London, Cambridge and Oxford, right in the middle there. What you also need to know about the Open University is that it is truly open. Anyone can come to us and study regardless of their prior school education. So as long as you can read and write, you can study with us, whatever your exit year of school might be. Most of our students are also working. They're in full-time or part-time employment while they study with us. We have a large contingent of students coming from deprived areas in the UK, so there is a significant social mission we have. And most of our students are mature students, above older than 25. The robotic telescope, which is the focus of this talk, and the effectiveness of this is called Pirate. We set this up in 2009 as a pilot project to study how we could deploy robotic telescopes, remote access telescopes for distance teaching students, which is apparently, which would seem like a very natural complement. And it used to be in Mallorca until 2015, and last 2 or 3 years in this form is pictured as a CDK17 on Paramount and software-wise driven by ACP. At the moment, or now, Pirate had to move. That's just looking forward. The study I'm talking about next is on activities that took place while it was in Mallorca. It has now found a new, hopefully permanent home at a much better observing site, Canary Islands, Tenerife. It was with a strict stopover in Munich for maintenance in 2016. So how do we deploy it? We deploy it essentially at 2 levels, what you would call second year and third year, potentially, in an activity at second year where students essentially image a star cluster and then work on the color magnitude diagram. At third year, a more open-ended, longer project where they revisit a variable star or binary star and obtain a long-term light curve phase fold to interpret the nature of the source. The key here is we link these students together into groups. That's not something they would normally do as distance teaching students. They would essentially normally work in isolation at home, study their books or their online materials, and perhaps attend once in a while tutorials with their teachers, but not with other students unattended by teaching staff. While for the observing sessions, we built them explicitly via Skype. They are linked via Skype in audio only, voice only mode, and work through the activities during the night. And then set up, this is a typical result, which I just skipped because we need to cover quite a bit more. We then wanted to know how effective these activities really were. And this is research which was part of a PhD project of Marc Schröder, who completed his PhD last year. And the question he tried to investigate was how effective both the virtual and I'll tell you what this was, the virtual experiments related to this activity, and the remote access activity, the robotic telescope activity, was in teaching practical science to our undergrads. The tension here is, how do you teach distance learning students practical science? You don't have them in the lab. You still need for science to be in a degree type a dose of practical work. And the robotic telescope activity was built to deliver this for the astronomy-minded students. But the study here was about how well did this replace the previously existing field study, field trip to an observatory. And the question in particular was how important is authenticity in reproducing this on-site activity, how important is elements of sociability, linking students together when they do this activity, and is there a role of meta-functionality of these virtual experiments? And when I say virtual experiments in this context, it was simply us providing to the students ACP on a different platform in simulator mode for them to practice what it looks like and what buttons to press and how to get it to do what they needed to do for the night. So we set up training sessions where they logged on and got familiar with ACP. So that's what we call the virtual activity. And of course, the simulator does produce all this for you in ACP. It does deliver images, mock images taken from a capsule. They look near perfect. And it also does typically speed up the time, so anything that's much faster than normal. Does this work? This was studied with a fairly robust physics education approach. So we had a mixed methods approach where we both had quantitative and qualitative data on a sample of about 200 students, pre and post activity surveys with typically Likert style queries and questions, but also after the event structured interviews of groups of students via Skype, a smaller number of students. So what does this tell us? Some of it is perhaps surprising. One outcome, if you look for correlations in this rather big and complicated data set, there aren't too many significant ones. The one which was obvious was with age, increasing age, the acceptance of remote experiments, telescope, was higher. Thank you. While in terms of the assessment, the success of the students, those students who achieved higher grades at the end also were the ones who said the activities were more enjoyable and vice versa, which perhaps is not too surprising, but it's a quantitative finding which can be reproduced. The qualitative themes that emerged in these interviews and open-ended surveys are 5, and they are, first of all, it is important to be real or to have some degree of realism. So the interface they expect in order to accept these activities needed to have a feel so that they could see, yes, I'm talking to a real instrument. And so for instance, a webcam linked to it to see the real instrument do something was important. On the other hand, one question was, had you rather have a handset reproduced perhaps in some 3D animation to mimic what you had with your small telescope in the backyard? And the resounding answer was no, that's not necessary, because we know our professional interest is trust as well. There is now not enough situational awareness. The student felt a certain disconnect from the instrument. They didn't know how it's really assembled, what it's looking like there. It didn't have this feel to it as you would have if you are next to the telescope, despite the webcam. So the one webcam certainly wasn't enough. The students were adamant they wanted real data, so the simulator data, which wasn't really meant to be a replacement for the data they were working with, but they felt the simulator data, which is these near-perfect images with stars, wasn't good enough. They wanted messy, dirty data to learn more, right? Even at simulator level. Social learning, they deemed is very, very important. The voice-only connection during the night meant, of course, that the meeting as a group, the collaboration then wasn't quite as real as if you were sitting next to each other in the control room or in the telescope dome. But it's so much better, they said, than what they usually have, what is an asynchronous forum monitored and replied to by tutors. We felt perhaps we should add talking heads to the Skype, so not just voice only, but faces. And again, this was dismissed because there was already too much visual information to take in. You had the ACP interface, you needed to watch the weather go, you needed to download the images and assess their quality. There was too much to do, and there would not be space seeing your fellow observatory people. They would have preferred very much to be prepared for the group working in Skype using the simulator, which is something we didn't think of. The simulator was set up as a single student activity just to get used to the device. And they suggested, why don't you set it up as the same activity and let the 4 or 5 of us assemble and work through the simulator in just the same way as we would normally during the night. And finally, the meta-functional elements they felt ought to be such that they can be switched off. Most were surprised how much more work and time is needed on the real telescope compared to the simulator one, even though it was told, to them in the instructions, this goes much. Now I have to wrap up quickly. So our conclusions there from this study was that students do accept virtual experiments, simulator, instead of hands-on activities when we do approximate the interface, which are used in the context of operating, which is the case when they do deliver messy, more genuine data, when it's clear how this differs from a realistic, not simulated entity, and when they are flagged as training. So they wouldn't go for the simulated activity as a replacement for the real one. The remote experiments themselves are accepted instead of on-site work if they incorporate realistic activities, which they do exactly the same activities, so that's a tick. If the connection is stable, this may have been triggered particularly by our site in Mallorca, which suffered from quite some difficult infrastructure problems such as power cuts. This is not welcome if you're in the middle of a session, a live session, then suddenly everything drops dead. The video feed is necessary, but not enough. Group work needs to be in there, facilitated and prepared. Now, this is the last proper slide, and then I have just one word after this. What we implemented as a recommendation for us is we want to create a better situational awareness by adding more webcams and more audio feeds to give a better view of being on site. We want to prepare the social interactions better by linking the group to each other beforehand in the simulator. And that's where I would like to take this study, but let me just finish by saying we did move to Tenerife, and so this is the base of Canary Islands, also where ASCO have their 40 centimeters, and I don't know why the last slide doesn't move. The animation. So that's the one. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and the two facilities known under the name Open Science Observatories. The website is telescope.org, which the Open University took over from the Bradford Robotic Telescope, which is now being decommissioned. And the second of two domes we own, one is Pirate, the second is called House, is the one which will take over operation from the Bradford Robotic Telescope. Thank you.
So if someone's got a very urgent question, we've got time for one question. Otherwise you can catch Ulrich.
Sorry. Since you have evidence that situational awareness is important, right? That's so wonderful that a clean academic study shows that. That would give us an excuse to have a virtual environment. You must have thought about this. 3D goggles, you're in the observatory, with a webcam, some updated as the telescope moves. And
absolutely.
And actually, I think that would be a huge attractor, and put us at a real forefront in some ways.
So yes, that's exactly what we would like to have. It's something we worked on, then dropped because it just was too resource intensive then. But now, with this result, it's crying out, this is the solution.
And the tools are so much better.
I fully agree.